Welcome to Construction Cashflow. I'm your host, Stu Davidson, and if you haven't already done so, hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode.
So they're going to write a contract that effectively has everything in the kitchen sink in there, whether it's necessary or not, and then they're going to basically demand that the specialist contractor has to sign up to these terms, when it's actually the specialist contractor, to my mind anyway, who knows their trade best. And it should be them that dictates the terms, not the other way around. It's almost like unplugging somebody from the Matrix, it really is. This industry needs to change.
In this show, we ask our guests to tell us their story, tell us a little bit about their background, how they got to where they are today, how they developed their product, their services, their ideas. And we discuss how that can affect construction cash flow and other areas of construction. And also to give us an idea of how we might make things better and give you a few tips and ideas to take away with you. And listen to the end where you'll find out more about them, more about our guests, about what motivates them, what inspires them, and hopefully that'll inspire you too. And always, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss another episode. In this episode, I'm delighted to introduce you to Yosof Ewing. Yosof has over 30 years experience in the industry, working on large infrastructure, civil engineering projects, and also within the energy industry in the UK and internationally. Yosof is an expert witness, mediator, and expert in adjudication. More recently, he's been helping specialist contractors draft their own terms and conditions, reviewing contracts, and coaching and mentoring. So it's without further ado, I'd love to introduce you to Yosof Ewing. Hi Yosof, welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm good, yeah. Quite excited, Stu. I've never actually done a podcast before, so thanks for having me. I hope I can add some value to your listeners' lives here. Yeah, sure. So starting at the beginning, I was born 49 years ago now. I turned 49 on Boxing Day last year. Didn't have a particularly great start to life. I was born in Glasgow in 1973. My mother had some issues with postnatal depression and various other mental illnesses, which I didn't know about until I was a little older. She wasn't particularly nice to me when I was born, and long story short, I was taken off her and put into a children's home down in Ayrshire, where I stayed until about 1979. Then I was fostered to Kirkcaldy in Fife, where I've lived ever since with a family up until I was in my teens. The foster home, the care home that I lived in, the children's home rather, in Dundonald in Ayrshire, actually was closing down in 1979. So my entire family were kind of split up and put into different homes throughout the UK and overseas eventually. Not a particularly great start, but then I grew up and became an engineer at 16, working with my dad on Wimpy home sites throughout Edinburgh and the Lothians and Central Belt. I really enjoyed that. I got a great love for our industries, particularly the people within it. I thought it was really exciting getting to travel all over and set things out and put roads in the right place and make sure people were paid on time and so forth. And that's where I learned the ropes about commercial management, project management. I always had a kind of curiosity as to why things did or happened the way they were supposed to happen. I always looked to ways to improve them. And then we kind of fast forwarded to 2005. My dad's company unfortunately went insolvent because a lot of companies wouldn't pay him what he was due when he was due to be paid. That kind of, they've been too dramatic, but actually broke my heart, in all honesty. He gave me a home when a lot of people wouldn't have. And to watch that happen to him was really, really, well, just not nice. And I resolved at that point in time to say, well, this industry needs to change because, as an engineer, we do great things in the built environment. We change it in a great way, but for some reason we just can't seem to build relationships. And I just think that's nonsense. So that's what I've been trying to do ever since that happened, in protecting smaller companies, the specialist contractors in adjudication, giving them advice, trying to get them to stay, safe and to for want of a better word. So, yeah, so I did that up until, well, I still do that today, sorry. In 2015, I went over to the States and I studied entrepreneurship at Babson College. And it was over there that I studied companies like Facebook and Airbnb and stuff. And I saw that they did platform businesses. And I thought that would be great to have a platform in construction where we could effectively have solutions for companies who are dealing with poor payment, cash flow issues, and so forth. So that's been what I've been working on ever since. But recently I changed over to coaching clients instead of just working with them in disputes. The way I figured it was, I've been doing this for 32 years. I've worked around all areas of the industry, particularly in difficult situations when insolvency and non-payment, late payment, excuse me, and so forth. And it occurred to me that the best way to help the companies that I worked with was to actually work with them before the problem started. I've been trying to do that for many years, but I didn't, in all honesty, Stuart, I didn't really know how to articulate it very well. And the problem kind of just kept going. So I'm really glad to say in the last 6 months, I've taken a number of coaching clients, and I'm seeing big gains for these guys already. They're not putting up with the rubbish terms and the crap terms that they're expected to sign up to. They're putting their best foot forward, and they notice a difference. So yeah, hopefully we'll see more of that. And yeah, exciting times ahead.
Yeah, amazing story, Yosof. There's so much there that builds us around what we do and what we end up doing and what we feel passionate about. And your background, obviously there's clearly a passion for supporting, helping people, and it's a very, I'd like to, in the construction podcast, to explore, yes, the technical nuts and bolts of how subcontractors and contractors can protect themselves in terms of setting up contracts, but there's a very human side as well, isn't there?
Yeah.
And I like what you're doing, because the coaching side, we can all be an expert witness or a lawyer and help them after the event, but really it's a bit like if you give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. If you give him a fishing rod, he'll eat for the rest of his life. So it's great what you're doing, is that you're actually teaching subcontractors to be able to stand on their own 2 feet, look after themselves, and actually really eat for the rest of their lives, because if they're not paid, they're not eating, they're not putting food on the table for their families. So it's a real great cause that you have there. And it's nice to see the tables turning a little bit, and people like yourself putting some power into the hands of the supply chain, because for a very long time the contract terms and conditions have been dictated by main contractors, but really they're written, I always feel they're written by lawyers for lawyers, because they've got grey areas, and lawyers love grey areas. That's where they have fun. They have fun in the grey areas, but we don't have fun in the grey areas. The suppliers, the contractors don't have fun in the grey areas. That's where their stress is. That's where they're going to lose money, in the grey areas. So you can see there's two different sides to this equation. So how are you finding the coaching work over the last 6 months? What do you see is the key problems that the coaching solves, and the key problems that your clients are facing at the moment?
Yeah, interestingly, so see, the main problem is, like you said, the contracts that are written 99% of the time aren't actually fit for purpose. They aren't actually practicable, as in, they won't actually work in real life. Like you say, they're written for contracts. by lawyers, for lawyers, if you like, ultimately in disputes further down the line, potentially. It's the old, is it the fox looking after the hen house? Maybe I'm being a bit cynical there. However, let's park that one. But the way I see it is, and I know a lot of people in the legal industry, and I'm not saying they're all, out to get contractors, because at the end of the day, they do what they're asked to do. It's a function. So essentially, if an employer or main contractor goes to a lawyer, and bear in mind the main contractor and the employer, this is a key distinction, doesn't know the specialist trade as well as a specialist tradesman or contractor knows. So they're going to write a contract that effectively has everything in the kitchen sink in there, whether it's necessary or not. And then they're going to basically demand that the specialist contractor has to sign up to these terms, when it's actually the specialist contractor, to my mind anyway, who knows their trade best, and it should be them that dictates the terms, not the other way around. And that's the problem I see in the industry. So when it comes to coaching, I basically explain that. It's almost like unplugging somebody from the matrix. It really is. When you see the light bulb moment and they go, right, okay, wait a minute. A lot of these guys don't even realize they can challenge it. So if somebody says, you got to sign these contract terms. I had one the other day with a client, and it's a typical old one saying, they wait until the guy's on site, even though they've accepted the offer. And now they've put a contract to my client to say that if you don't sign this, we won't pay you. Now, here's a free piece of advice for your listeners. That's actually illegal, and it has been for a number of years. You can't force somebody to sign a contract. So my client, as I've said to them and advised them and advised the other side, that the contract already exists. So we don't need to sign your contract. It's so simple as that. You dropped the ball. You should have put that out with the invitation to tender. You didn't. You can't now, after the event, come back and say, well, you got to sign these or we won't pay you. You can't do that. It's simple. So it's just things like that.
And they've already started on site, so they've accepted the terms by allowing the contractor to start work.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's it. But the amount of companies out there that they would just go ahead and sign it because they think, well, I better do it in case I get into bother. And I say to them, well, hang on a minute here. Why did you get into this business? So most tradespeople, my background is civil engineering, but you have an electrician, for example, or a plumber, or you would have gas engineers. There's so many different trades out there. These are the guys that are in the industry for me. These are the guys who effectively get up every day, go to work and try to do a great job, yet and know their trade. That's the key thing. They know their trade, but yet they're dictated to by the people who don't know their trade. It's back to front. And to me, it's, pardon my French, but it's completely bullshit. It's just like, hang on a minute here. Who's working for who?
Exactly. I was at a pre-start meeting actually only last week, and they were going through the contract terms, and there was a term in there which I see all the time, which is a catch-all. It's the subcontractor is deemed to include everything arising from the drawings, even if it's not on the drawings, and the contract and tender information is for just reference only, but does and we reserve the right to change anything with no increase to the contract sum. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I mean, what you're talking about, because it exactly gets back to what you say. They have no inclination of what's included in the subcontract package, but it's just a catch-all and an arse covering exercise that if they've missed anything, they can get the subcontractor to do it for free.
Yeah, well, this is it. And the thing for me, and this is why I decided to launch the coaching side, was to say, well, look, my clients, typically I would have to wait. So my business model was I would wait until somebody screwed up. It was simple as that. Until there was a dispute, I'm kind of waiting there for somebody to come along and say, right, I need your help in a dispute. So I've worked with clients. Some of these guys have done 8 or 9 adjudications over the last, 16 years I've been doing this. And it occurred to me, I thought, well, not only is it particularly stressful, not just for my clients, but for myself as well, and for any practitioners, it's not really a natural state of being. It's been constantly in dispute. And I said to them, well, my clients last year, I went, look, why don't we look at it from a different perspective? You guys pay me a lot of money, to be fair, it's percentages and so forth, to get you out of a difficult situation because of the business model. And I said, why don't we turn on its head and say, well, I'll read your contracts, I'll indemnify you against any future adjudications, and all you have to do is sign up for a period of time, and then I'll teach you everything that I know. And when I put it that way, people were just like, the penny dropped, and they were like, shit, right, okay, that's interesting. And people have started to sign up, and it's I love doing it. It's so much fun, and it's so kind of fulfilling when you actually see these guys actually understand what it's like. Don't settle. And if you think about it this way, a great illustration of our industry, Stu, is if you think about it this way: where on earth, what other industry or what other sector could you basically effectively demand, or in some respects extort, an interest-free, unsecured loan that you can potentially default on with no penalty? Nobody in the world would you get away with that. But yet that's our construction industry.
Absolutely. And it's an antiquated culture that goes back hundreds of years, and it's never really changed.
I know.
With all the rhetoric and all the important reviews, so-called, that have been written about working together and etc. There's still the cultural thing, that not the human side of it, the cultural side of it, that hasn't really been addressed. It's top down, and so things do need to change. It needs to change still. And I think the only way we can do it is people like yourself that are actually putting the knowledge and the expertise in the hands of subcontractors and contractors, that they can then come back and say, look, actually, this may be the contract, but this is our terms and conditions, and have the courage to say, actually, no, I'm not signing up to it. These are our terms. We're the experts in the field. This is the best way to frame the contract. And the frame and the contract, needs to be there so that everyone can make a profit. Not everyone passes the risk or passes the buck or covers their backside. It's let's make a profit as an industry, and be proud that we're creating wealth down the line for communities and families, and we can't do that if the money's not flowing.
100%. This is always the problem. And to me, I see it a lot on people talk about it on LinkedIn, and I've seen it in my work over the years, and it's this kind of them and us culture. And I'm like, pardon my French, fuck that. It's not them and us. We're all in this together. It's literally, we are all human beings living on a piece of rock, floating through space. And ultimately, you don't know when your time's up. So just be kind to people. Why do people feel the need? Like you say, so, and again, from the flip side, I see subcontractors constantly moaning and berating people online and saying, subbies bashing, all this kind of stuff. And it does go on, but we could either moan about it or we could do something about it. And I'm in the latter camp. I'm just like, well, I used to be a subcontractor. I know what it's like to be like that, in a nice position. So I got smart. That's what I did. But now I'm turning it around, giving that knowledge back to the industry to say, well, look, these guys are going to do that as long as you let them away with it. Don't let them away with it. It's not really rocket science, but it's a huge paradigm shift in people's minds because they're so used to that's just the way it's done. And when you actually give them a shake and go, well, we'll do it differently. That's why I'm looking for like enlightened leaders to come and join this movement, to come along and say, well, we're not doing it that way anymore. We are the many, you're the few, as in like the old proverbial tail wagging the dog, but the minute the dog realizes it wags the tail's screwed, and that's what we need to do, is to wake up people in the industry to say, well, hang on a minute, you are the specialist, you have the knowledge, so why are you being told what to do with your job? Did you go through that apprenticeship and all the years of training and then learning your craft after you did your training to be told how to do your job? I don't think so. So why are you accepting that? If these guys could do your job, they would do it, but they can't. So they come to you, and then it basically dictate the terms, dictate the payment terms and stuff like that. I mean, imagine you walked into Marks and Spencer's and you saw an apple for 70p and you took it to the till and said, I'm only going to give you 30p for this and I'll be back in a month to pay you. I think the security guard would throw you out the freaking front door. Yeah. I know I'm kind of making light, but that's the absurdity of it sometimes. And it's when you explain that to people in coaching and they go, know your worth, know your value in the marketplace. If other companies, your competition, decide they want to go ahead and do that, fucking let them. If they want to be stupid enough to sign up to that, stand your ground, only work with people that you are comfortable with. And if you get, as I call it, red flags. So I'll say to my clients all the time, red flag, red flag, red flag. And these red flags are just so blatant. It's just, like, for example, that company sending an email after you've started on site. If you don't sign my contract, I won't pay you. Well, we basically said, if that's the way you're going to be, we'll just retract our offer and walk off the site because there is no contract and we're not in breach, So things like that.
How would a subcontractor sell their contractual terms back to a main contractor or a client developer if it's a construction management route? How would they, what is the best way? So they're coming towards a contractor that's got his standard terms and he's used to his standard terms, and the contractor says, okay, look, you know, I can't accept those terms. These are our policies, these are our terms. How would they sell that to the main contractor, or what advantage do you think there could be to a main contractor or a developer of the subcontractor proposing these specialist terms?
See, I think we need to reframe it, because it's not a case of selling the idea to a main contractor. The main contractor is like the person walking into Marks and Spencer's looking for an apple. The main contractor has no right to dictate terms. They're looking for a service. If they knew how to do the service, then they would be in the right place to dictate what terms. So in my experience, you do have a lot of kind of tier 2 contractors that might have a set of kind of standard terms and conditions and policies, but they're never standard because they're amended to suit each site. So that if they're amended to suit each site, they can also be amended to incorporate the subcontractor's conditions. Bear in mind, the subcontractor is the person who knows what risk that they're prepared to expose themselves to. So if you think about it, a main contractor basically approaches a subcontractor and says that in order to work with me, you've got to give me a program, you've got to give me a price, you've got to do all these things to satisfy their policies, if you like. In doing that, they're effectively relying on the expertise of the subcontractor to a point, except for when the subcontractor says, but these are my terms. And it's like, but it's cherry picking. And so the point I'm saying, and the takeaway for the listeners, is when you put an offer in, your offer includes your standard terms and conditions. That's your offer. They can't just split it apart. Because I used to do that as a subcontractor when I worked for my dad years ago. I would sit with a lot of the bigger contractors at the pre-start meeting, and they would say, right, subcontractors' conditions null and void. And I would literally close my laptop down and go to move to stand up. Where are you going? Well, you've retracted your offer, your acceptance of my offer. There's no point in me being here. No, we accept your offer, we just don't accept your terms. I mean, well, my terms form part of my offer. If you don't accept them, and then they would basically go through the set of terms, which I still have to this day, and I actually sell it to the industry as part of my intellectual property. You know, as part of the coaching services. You know, I give them all these services, these terms to effectively bolster their business, and then I show them how to apply them. And guess what? The main contractors come back, and we either amend their main contract. A lot of the times, you know, we take, like, for example, if it's NEC3, we'll score out loads and loads of Z clauses, which are just nonsense and completely irrelevant. And then we'll say, well, these are the terms you propose, and then we'll put them in the order of precedence within the agreed contract schedule. And it works. You know, people just don't believe it until they see it actually in practice, and then they go, I didn't think this was possible. And you think, told you. I've been doing it for years.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. That I think that's the amazing key thing, is that the main contractors are open to accepting the amended terms, whereas, you know, the fear, I think, from a subcontractor is that I'm not going to get the job because they're not going to accept the terms, you know. But having said that, you know, I've worked with subcontractors or no subcontractors before that have, rather than putting an amended contract terms, they've accepted the terms because they need the work, or they felt they needed the work, but then they've lost money on those jobs, you know, and the stress that, you know, they've been kicked around. You know, the main contractor starts to wave around the contract, and they've been kicked around. For example, you know, I know a brickwork firm that was on a large project, and the site coordination wasn't great, site management wasn't great. You know, they weren't providing loading bays and sufficient timely deliveries, but were blaming the contractor. And they were asking the contractor they wanted more bricklayers. So threatening them with default notices because they're blaming them for the delay. So the contractor put the extra bricklayers on, more and more bricklayers. But as you can imagine, the more bricklayers they put on the job, the lower, the lower the productivity is. And, you know, they're being paid, the bricklayers expect to get paid every week. and the bricklaying subcontractor is on 54-day terms. So you know, you know, and at the same time, the contractor was issuing pay less notices and contra charges because he was blaming the contractor for the subcontractor for the delays. So there you go. It doesn't take long before the subcontractor goes out of business, and at the same time, the main contractor was lining up another bricklayer because he had an outstanding payment of £250,000.
It's brutal, and it's what I mean. That's what happens in the industry. And again, you know, the way I say is that's the risk, shall we say? So think about this in terms of. So I often say my analogy is if you imagine your profit as a person, you know, like a workman. And before, so when I worked in civils, we had, you know, the hard hat, the high vis vest, the overalls, gloves, safety shoes, you know, all that. You had to wear all this equipment before you went on a site. And I'm saying, well, what do you do with your profit when you expose your profit to risk? That's the same idea. You need to protect your profit, because without the profit, none of the other stuff matters, you know. So going back to the point with the bricklaying contractor, he's in that problem situation. So that's a symptom of the industry, if you like, non-payment and so forth. What I'm trying to do, I'm not trying to do, I'm actually doing, is my services go to the root cause of the problem. It's a lack of knowledge, a lack of understanding of the rights and the position in the marketplace. The position in the marketplace is actually above. So another thing I thought about before I came on to the podcast as well, just something I thought about is when you think of the name subcontractor, even that name itself makes it sound like they're lesser than the main contractor. And I'm thinking, well, bollocks to that. That's not actually true. When you think about it, that's a perception that they are some kind of hierarchy, that we are above you, we pay you. Yeah, there's a supply chain, but it doesn't necessarily have to be vertical. It could be horizontal, you know. So it could be a chain that sits along, you know, a flat plane, and everybody works together and is equal. So, you know, this idea that because you're a subcontractor, the main contractor, he's in charge, he tells you what to do, and you've just got to do it. We need to change that perception in the industry, because it's not the case. Like I said, these specialist contractors are the ones who know how to do their job. The main contractor does not know how to do their job. Therefore, why are they telling you what to do? It makes no sense, you know. And so not only are they telling you what to do, they're telling you when they'll pay you. They're telling you all these things. You think, whoa, stop a minute here. Put the boot back on the other foot. To the subcontractor, the specialist contractors, I prefer to call them. So you're a specialist contractor, you know your trade. You tell these guys that this is the risks that you know in your industry are relevant, and a main contractor that has any common sense should listen to you, because if they don't, then they're setting themselves up to fail. Because I would use that evidence in an adjudication against them further down the line. Say, well, your subcontractor actually told you at tender stage these were the issues, you refused to accept them, and then look what's happened. You know, so these are the things. It's actually start at the beginning. You know, there's no point in waiting until, you know, you're on site, because the main contractor can't coordinate all the different trades, points the finger at you, and then takes liquidated damages of all the trades, and he's quids in. You know?
Yeah, exactly. And I think sometimes the problem is that the main contractor's policy, they're not all, but some of the larger ones are not construction people, they're investment people.
Yeah.
They're basically developers, and you know, they're working on a very tight budget. The cost of land, the cost of property is high, and the funders in insurance have strict rules around the margins, etc. So they're constantly pushing the amount of money left in to do the project down and down. You know, so I think you've got that kind of that pressure. But I must admit, where I've procured work before, so I've procured from a client's point of view, a contractor's point of view, tender packages, etc. I quite like subcontractors issuing their own terms and conditions when I'm putting a contract, when I'm drafting a contract, because it gives me much more insight into where the risks are. So because quite often we de-risk things in the industry. It's de-risked from the top. So we have an idea. We're trying to do our risk analysis at the developer, financer level, main contractor level. But when you start to get the policies in from the subcontractors, it can de-risk in the other direction. So I've actually put contracts together before where I've taken into account the wording of the subcontractors' policies and terms and conditions, is to be able to take all of those and coordinate those as a whole. So so that one's not compromising the other. But it takes a lot of skill to coordinating the works on site. Quite often is the main contractor sits in the middle, and if something goes wrong, it's never going to be their fault for coordination. It's either going to be the client's fault for changing something, or it's going to be the specialist's fault for delaying something. So I'll issue a contra charge to the specialist, and on the other side I'll issue a claim to the client.
Where the main contractor effectively, to some extent, in my experience, has been almost like a management consultant. I was involved in adjudication during lockdown. It was a best part of £10 million was in play, and I remember the project director on the other side. I think he was an ex-used car salesman, something crazy like that. I was just thinking, well, how did he get into that position? And you're thinking, you're speaking to somebody who doesn't have a clue what you're talking about, literally. And you're thinking, right, okay, well, what hope does a subcontractor, the specialist contractor, beg your pardon, have when, that's what we're up against. So the lack of knowledge isn't just with the subcontractors, and this is what I'm explaining to subcontractors as well. A lot of subcontractors that I advise or coach rather just assume, and that's where a lot of the problem is. There's just these assumptions in the industry. The main contractor knows what they're doing. On a lot of occasions, no, they don't. So hence the reason why I always say, put your own T's and C's in there. Your trade, put them in. So, as I said, a lot of the time they'll come up further down the line and use the tactic that if you don't sign it, we won't pay you. Well, for a start, they can't do that because it's against the Construction Act. It has been for a long time. You can't do that. And the fact of the matter is that there's already a contract in play. And if the contract in play is based on their offer and acceptance and there aren't terms in there, then the scheme for construction contracts that came from Parliament regulations come into play. So there's always a contract. It doesn't matter, So this view that you've got, like for example, I did an NEC3 contract without a word of a lie. I had 67 pages of amendments, Z clauses, and I'm thinking, I went back to the other side. So I was working for or advising a client who I'd done a number of adjudications for, and this guy, to be fair to him now, he won't turn a wheel without me giving him the green light, which is good. It's a great relationship to have. And he basically said, look, I don't know what you're talking about. Could you speak to the main contractor? So I did. I went back, and I can't remember the clause off the top of my head, but it was something just completely absurd and unworkable. And I said to him, look, I've scored out the best part of 45 pages of Z clauses my client won't accept. And they were like, oh, well, you need to sign that or you'll not get the job. And I mean, you misunderstand. We don't want the job as it stands right now, and the offer has been retracted until such times as this. The conversation changed like that. They went, oh no, but we need you to do it. Well, we know you need us to do it. Thank you for admitting that. By the way, we need to change these. And I put a couple of clauses to the guy on the call, and I can't remember off the top of my head what they were, but I asked him if he knew. More importantly, I said, do you even know what that means? And to be fair to the guy, he went, I don't have a clue, but we had to sign them. I went, well, I would disagree that you had to sign them. You chose to sign them, but my client doesn't have to sign them. And long story short, my client didn't sign them. We got all these taken out, and his offer and terms were accepted on the project, and all the amendments were removed. And again, my client just sits scratching. I have no idea how you did that, but thank you. So but I'm trying to teach him, because again, it's like I can't do what he does. And that's what I say to him. So I'm not, for example, I can't go and rewire a house. I can't build the Queen's Ferry crossing. I can't, do the Thames Tideway tunnel. But I know how to avoid disputes, and I know how to resolve disputes. I know how to make sure your cash flow works. I know these are all things that I know. So why not get somebody that knows what they're doing to do it, instead of just almost like playing Russian roulette every time you sign a contract?
Exactly. Do you think there's a scope then to simplify contracts throughout? Because we quite often get these contracts with so many Z clauses or so many amendments, and you've got a standard form of contract which is got so many grey areas in anyway. Then we add in amendments, and then we add in amendments to those amendments, and then amendments to those amendments that amend the other amendments. So nobody actually understands what the hell's going on.
Exactly.
But the lawyers love it. That's where they have fun. That's where they dance. That's their bread and butter. But for us that build buildings, it's not fun. It's kind of, let's make it simple. And do you think there's any scope for getting to a smart contract scenario?
Well, the way AI is going potentially in the future, I've been dabbling with that for marketing reasons, but I see that being an idea in the future with if we kind of systemize a lot of the kind of the trends, shall we say, the problematic issues and areas, then potentially, yeah. But I think to me the main issue isn't, you can't oversimplify it, because every project's unique, albeit it rests on three key principles for me, and it goes back to what we call the Barnes Triangle, named after Martin Barnes. He was one of the main guys behind NEC, a bit of a legend to me, to be honest. Much respect, but he talked about time, cost, and quality, and that's what I feel we bring back to it is, and every time I work in the industry doing my job, I always think of the three pillars as time, cost, quality, and only those three things matter. So every time I look at a contract, and this is the irony, you could spend thousands of pounds, a big main contractor could spend that contract comes to me and I literally drive a horse and cart through it because it's completely nonsensical. It's like a Swiss cheese. There's so many holes in it that it's completely unworkable, because, like, take the NEC, for example, it actually says at the start, do not amend the core clauses, and they go and amend the core clauses. And then we come to adjudication and we're trying to interpret it, and we can say, well, it can mean 5 different things, by the way, and we choose it can mean that, it could mean this, it mean that, and it becomes silly. You think, well, why don't we just leave it as is? Because people with really intelligent minds put that together as a standard form. But why are you writing a standard form? It's crazy. Yes, you can have Z clauses, but I remember years ago down in London, it was the Lee Tunnel, and he had ZZ clauses. And I thought I'd seen it all. I thought, what? And it was literally
too many Zs, and they're asleep.
I know, that's what I was. I almost fell asleep reading it. I was thinking, what? None of it even made a lot of sense. I was like, what is this even for? So it's all. Contract to me is the key things are how to get paid, what to do if you don't get paid, and that's what the Construction Act is all about. There's the cash flow. Sorry, so even the Construction Act came from Parliament, so we're talking about cash flow, obviously, on your podcast, and the cash flow. We used to call it when it first came out. It was known affectionately as the Cash Flow Act. Unfortunately, it's not really. It's done a great job, and I have to commend. It's fantastic. Adjudication is a great process, and it is like the only game in town. I think Coulson said in the King's College report last year, and I agree with him. But I don't think Parliament went far enough. So I talk about this on LinkedIn quite a lot. So, for example, when you have a decision that as a small contractor, say you were chasing £50,000 in adjudication and you won it, and the main contractor just turns around and says, I disagree with the decision, and forces you to go to court. I think that's wrong. I think, no, whether the adjudicator got it wrong or not is irrelevant. All the judges say the same thing. The adjudicators can get it wrong, but if you want to rerun it, go to court. But I think it should be mandatory that you should pay that money to that guy there and then, because people are going insolvent because they're not. Particularly with lockdown, when the courts were closed, I'd never seen an enforcement prior to that point, and then all of a sudden everybody starts refusing to pay the decisions against them because they knew the courts were shut, and you're thinking that's just wrong, So, yeah,
exactly. I'm not. From what I've seen from adjudication, it can be a very expensive process, particularly if it's a complex case.
Yeah,
and I think especially subcontractors are, they're on a tight budget as it is, and the reason they're going to adjudication is probably because they haven't got the cash in the business because it's not being paid to them. And to then think about paying an adjudicator, paying a lawyer, paying a solicitor, paying an expert witness, it's quite a daunting prospect, even going to adjudication. I'd have thought, I was thinking the other day that it should be free adjudication to a subcontractor. There should be an option for a free adjudication, in my view. And a quick adjudication. One of the things the government and councils take from developers, because all of this comes, the budget's set at the development stage, whether it's a good deal, whether the deal stacks up or not. And then we all try and fit into it and save people's bacon, if you like, if they've signed a poor deal on a land deal or something. But you've got the seal payments and you've got the Section 106s. So there's these payments that are taken from developers, and then the councils use them for the community. Well, I would argue that you benefit the community by creating wealth in the community, and the way you create wealth in the community is that those people in the community, which are quite often specialist subcontractors in the construction sector, they get paid, so why can't something like a Section 106 or a seal payment be diverted towards funding a specialist adjudicator on each project?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Independent adjudicator.
Or even a collective fund, because not every project ends in dispute, to be fair. So but yeah, no, I like the idea. It's a good concept. What I've done with the contract coach, to make it more, what's the word, kind of easy to understand, but also more attractive to potential companies. So, like, for example, the directors that I speak to, when I say to them that we could coach you, but what I've done to sweeten the deal is I've effectively put my money where my mouth is and said, well, so you can sign up for a month-to-month basis if you want and cancel, with a month's notice. But if you actually sign up for 6 months with me, I will actually underwrite the costs of going to adjudication and do it purely on a no-win, no-fee basis. That's
amazing.
Well, that's it. But I did that because, so normally my process would be, there would be a discovery fee. In other words, I have to look, because this is the other thing, is that the way I work, and there's other companies out there that do no-win, no-fee, which I don't really agree with the process because they're not actually adding value. So the way I do it is, if you come to me with a dispute and you say, right, Yosof, if XYZ construction are owing me £100,000 or 20 million, or it doesn't matter, same principle, I would say, right, Stu, I need these documents. I've got a very clear onboarding process. When I got those documents, I'll give you a price to review them, a fixed price. It wouldn't change. I'll review that, and I'll tell you at that point in time your chances of success in an adjudication. And at that point, I'll tell you that I'll take your case. I'll then charge a setup fee for producing the notice and the referral, effectively running the case, and then it's a percentage of what we do and what we recover. Clients have loved that because they get certainty of cost. And ultimately, if we don't win, because sometimes that can happen, unfortunately, adjudication, then obviously it doesn't cost them any more money. So I've done that to that point. However, when I started the coaching, what I said was to prospective clients, I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll waive the discovery and I'll waive the setup costs. So I'll effectively set up an entire adjudication for you with no outlay whatsoever. And if we win, then it's a percentage of what we recover, and we split it so we're both in it together. And the idea is that I'm putting my money where my mouth is, and that skin in the game, as they say, because I'm so confident in my services that we should really avoid these situations. And so far, so good. We have, we'll see what the future brings, of course.
Well, that's amazing. And, Yosof, you're clearly pioneering, and I really like that. And it really aligns with my values as well, to pioneer change in that, it's affordable, disputes are affordable, that specialist subcontractors can table and have the confidence to table their own terms and conditions. And I think in the long term, it's going to benefit developers and main contractors, because it de-risks the areas of the grey areas and the areas of the unknowns, the thing they don't know about a specialist subcontractor or their trade, that they can get the feedback on. I'd much rather look at everybody's terms and conditions in terms of who's in the supply chain, and bring it together, coordinate that and bring it together, and then I can see the big picture of where the risks are, where the interfaces are, rather than just guess or have catch-alls. What you quite often see at the moment is catch-alls, and which don't really, I don't think in the long term help anybody. We need to get into the kind of nitty-gritty detail and properly manage it, and see where the risks really are. So yeah, no, I love the work you're doing, and I'm sure listeners will really be interested. You know, I think developers, contractors, specialists alike would be really interested in the work that you're doing. You know, it's refreshing.
Yeah, thank you, Stu. I really appreciate it. It's all about, you know, knowledge transfer. I mean, the thing is, to me, and I've said this a number of times, and I stand by this. In the 16 years since I left contracting to work in dispute resolution, and I'm trying to change the industry. Ultimately, I've yet to come across a dispute that was not avoidable. Sorry, what that was avoidable. Sorry, not avoidable. Got a double negative there. Sorry. You know what I'm saying? You know,
I know what you mean. Yeah.
The fact is, all these disputes are completely avoidable, and it's not just the financial costs; it's the stress. You know, the sleepless nights, the loss of opportunity for the subcontractor. All of that can be avoided, and you can learn. So this is why I like, you know, the approach to the coaching, and why the marketplace seems to be listening to what I'm saying. You know, slowly but surely is turning it around and saying, well. Because the other thing is, and one of the benefits to the subcontractor that I'm working with, or indeed the contractor, if it's to the employer, is to say, well, when the contractor or the employer is aware of my presence, the discussion changes. And I mean, that's not being arrogant. It's just a case of saying, well, you know, somebody independent's watching what you're doing here. You know, so you can't really do what you think you can do, and it actually creates, you know, almost like not a protective barrier, but almost like a bit of respect. That's probably the word I was looking for. You know, because ultimately that's what it should be. So a contract, to my mind, in terms of a definition, morally speaking, is an equitable division of risk between two parties who can understand and carry that risk. Otherwise, it's kind of servitude. Effectively, you will do what I say. I will pay you when I feel like it, and if you don't like it, tough. And you think, well, why would you sign up to that?
What 2 or 3 tips that you could give a specialist in terms of approaching a contract? He's doing a tender, what things he could look out for, and when's the best time to seek advice or to contact yourself, maybe?
Yeah, so if you think about, I always talk about kind of 3 key events in the life cycle of a contract. So if you bring it back to base principles, so I talk about contract strategy and maintenance. That's kind of how the coaching works. So every contractor that's out there, basically the clue's in the name, they enter contracts to generate revenue and profit. So those are the foundations for each of the companies. You know, the contractors, if the foundations aren't very, very solid, then they're going to have a problem. Then you put a strategy in place to effectively manage the risks that you've identified, and then you maintain it almost like a building. Yeah. So when a contractor is asked to tender for a project, that's the time he or she, should be coming to me or somebody like me for advice. Because one of the things I always see, or I'm not always, sorry, what I'm seeing more and more in the industry, and I used to see it as a contractor myself, is they'll ask you to price a project. And it's only, like I said before in the conversation, when you actually go to start the project, they'll give you a set of contract conditions and expect you to have it reviewed and signed within 24 hours before you start. You say, well, no. So the tip I would say to the listener is, if you're asked to tender without terms, ask for the terms. You know, at that point in time, because theoretically, in the strictest sense of the word, how can you possibly price that unless you know what the risks are in the contract? You know, so if they don't give you them, what to do is put subject to contract and limit your price to be accepted within 14 days, you know, so that you're not leaving it open-ended, but always say subject to contract, because then that way they can't force you into a contract by saying, we accept your offer. You go, no, I want to see the contract. Once you've got the contract, you can then go, well, I don't accept these terms, I withdraw my offer, good luck. And that, or as I said before at the very start, is have your standard set, you know, template of offer, but also have your conditions of contract, which I said, you know, I've developed one that I give out to coaching clients just now. Put your logo on the top of that one, stick it in with your offer, and every time you go onto site, the next time they come up to you and said, here's my terms and conditions, you've got to sign them, just say, well, no, we've already got a contract, what are you on about? You know? Yeah. So three tips. So like I said, do not sign unless you know what you're signing up to, and if you don't know, get advice. Like I said, have your own terms of business and stick to them. I would say that's the 3 key tips that I could give anybody, you know?
Yeah. Amazing tips. Absolutely amazing tips. No, I think that's very, very, very sensible. So, Yosof, time for a quick fire round about yourself and motivation and adventure.
Oh, okay. Here we go.
Okay, all right. So quick fire then. So let me ask you a few questions.
Go for
How
it.
do you start? How do you start your day?
Okay. Yeah. So get up in the morning, obviously, like most people, and when I have a shower, one of the routines I started last year. So I actually talking about coaching. The reason, sorry, I should give some credit to my own coach because this is a bit of a story. So my own coach, Luis Fernando, brilliant. I actually got the idea from being coached. Sorry, that's when I understood. I says this is what I should be talking. This kind of approach to clients. So that's where it came from. Yeah. But she sent me a book as an onboarding gift by Wim Hof. You know, the ice guy, the Iceman.
Yeah.
Yeah. So by the way, you look a bit like him. I should have mentioned.
Thanks a lot. I've been swimming in the ice cold sea actually, so maybe it turns you into a Wim Hof if you go
Oh yeah,
too many times.
Well, so sorry. Circling back, I've got a tendency to go off on tangents, so I apologise. But so how do I start my day? Is I get a shower, but I always do the ice cold part at the end. And I can honestly say that must be about 7 months or so that I've been doing it now. And what a difference it's made to just your mindset in the morning. You know, you feel energized. My health's much better. It's just I look 10 years younger. Maybe that last one's a bit of a stretch, but so but no, that's it. And then I have a cacao instead of a coffee. I don't drink coffee. And then just a healthy breakfast and maybe a bit of meditation if I've got time.
When are you most productive?
In the morning.
In the mornings.
Yeah. That's when I wake up and I'm like my mind's going. You know, what new things can we get up to this week or today?
What's something new happening in your life right now?
First thing that pops into my mind, I got engaged.
Hey, congratulations!
Yeah. Thank you to my. I'll be cheesy here, but I call her my soulmate. She is. I met her. I was going through a really tough time the last few years. I think I spoke about it on LinkedIn, but the happy ending was I asked her to marry me in the middle of George Square in Glasgow, where I was born. She had no idea. It was brilliant. I used my late mother's ring as well, so that was really, really something.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Amazing. Congratulations for that. So what would adventure look like to you?
Oh, that's easy. Me and Laura, that's my fiance, at the top of a Munro somewhere in Scotland. Absolutely. We love climbing.
Hey.
When I'm fit and able, of course.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, amazing. An amazing place to do that as well. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
A challenge you overcame that changed your life?
Oh, all right. Okay. A bit kind of deep here, but again, I wrote about this on LinkedIn. So back in 2018, in all honesty, I was actually suicidal. My mother, I talked about her growing up in care, but my natural mother died on the morning I was supposed to meet her. Back in 2017, my marriage ended not long after that, and I didn't get to see my kids, and I was really in a dark place by 2018. But I overcame it, healed, met the love of my life, and a happy ending. So yeah, how it changed me, it made me more empathetic. It made me understand why I'm here. Finally, I aligned my professional and personal life because I wasn't really being truly me until I actually told my story a little bit, which I'm getting to do today. So thank you for that. But yeah, it changed me in that. Well, I'm much more level-headed in what I think and do now.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that, because we all go through really, really bad times, and it's nice for somebody to talk about it, because then we feel confident about talking about it ourselves. And I know when I went through my business, got into trouble, and then I became homeless and without a relationship, mentally it was a struggle, to motivate myself. And I actually did some Facebook, Instagram lives, and probably because I thought nobody was actually listening, but I found it very therapeutic to talk about it. And I think it's nice to hear people like yourself share those really personal, difficult times that you went through, and it's really encouraging and inspiring that you've come through it, and now you're kind of really thriving. And so to anyone out there listening, if you are going through a tough phase, stick with it, talk about it. Don't be frightened to talk about it, because it's a human thing.
Mm-hmm.
We all, in our lives, we all go through these things, but you can get through it.
Yeah, and like you say, that the key thing for me is speaking. Well, it's not just for me, sorry, for anybody. If for your listeners as well. It wasn't until I put a cry for help out, I remember, on Facebook, and I remember, can't remember word for word, but I said something along the lines of, when you've got a broken arm, we say in Scotland you wear a stookie, the plaster of Paris. People will sign your stookie and people want to know, but if you say you've got a broken mind, it's almost like it's taboo, and you think, these are the things that need to be kind of broken down, and the minute I spoke about it and started, I actually lessened it, and that was the start of the healing journey. It's almost like you kind of hit rock bottom, but then you got to. There's only one way to go back, is back up, yeah. And and that's why I like talking about it, because I feel kind of compelled that I've survived that, and if I survived it, then it's duty bound as a human being to share that story with everyone.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you so much for that. It's really valuable.
Mm-hmm.
What inspires and motivates you?
What inspires me?
Or who motivates you?
I would say my kids. I know it's a bit cheesy, but my sons. I've got twin boys. They just turned 14. They're a handful. Well, two handfuls. They're almost my height. I'm not very tall, to be fair, but I just love them, and watching them grow inspires me. It gives me kind of purpose. My fiance, her kids too. I would say that would be it. I just that these are, and people that do good, when you see people doing good, not because they want something, just because it's the right thing to do. These people inspire me.
What does success mean to you?
Success means every time a company that I work with in the coaching sense wakes up and actually realizes their value, and then pushes it towards the marketplace and gets results that I just love. I live for it. It's so beautiful. What
advice would you give to your younger self?
Simple. Never give up.
Hey, thank you for that. Yeah. Thank you. Well, on that note, Yosof, really wonderful speaking to you. It's been an amazing conversation, and so much has come out of that, and I can't wait to listen through it again, and I'm sure the listeners will be really thrilled and interested, and there was a lot of energy and dynamics, and I really enjoyed the conversation. So thank you so much for coming on.
Shu, thank you very much for having me. It's been an absolute honor. My first podcast, to be fair, so thank you for that. Well, I'll maybe come back on in the future and tell you how we're getting on.
Fantastic. Yeah, and you'll be welcome. Yeah, do come back and let us know how you're getting on with the coaching and how the wedding goes and all of that. Yeah, so fantastic. Thanks so much. Yeah. Cheers, Yosof.
Thanks very much. Cheers.
You've been listening to Construction Cashflow. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already done so you never miss an episode. And remember, the faster cash flows, the faster wealth grows.